Welcome along to the Transfer Show, where we start with some breaking news concerning Newcastle's long search for a striker. Rob Dorset, Dharma Sheth are alongside me. We will come to you. What do you know about Jørgen Strand Larsen?
Well, big breaking news that's literally just come to us in the last few minutes. We know that Newcastle have had an interest in Jørgen Strand Larsen, of course, for some time now as a possible replacement for one of the two strikers that they're looking to replace, potentially if Alexander Isak leaves for Liverpool, of course. And we've been told in the last few minutes that Newcastle United are expected to make an increased offer to Wolves for him. We expect that offer to be around £60 million, so £5 million more than the latest of their previous two bids, which was rejected at £55 million last night. Interestingly, though, the Wolves boss Vitor Pereira said after that 3-2 win over West Ham in the Carabao Cup last night that every player has a price. Now, of course, people will read a lot into that, but our understanding is that Wolves' position remains he is not for sale. They don't want to sell him in this window, especially bearing in mind that they've got so little time left in the window to try and sort out a replacement and what's been described to us as a Premier League-ready replacement. I mean, that's the point. Strand Larsen is a key part of the Wolves' side. He's such an important player for them. They can't just buy another young player or take a risk on somebody from perhaps a European club who doesn't know the Premier League and throw him in there and expect him to do a job. It would leave a big hole in the Wolves squad. And so for Newcastle...
Particularly after leaving Cunha.
Well, exactly. And so for Wolves to accept an offer for him at this stage, it's going to have to be a big bid. And the question now is, do Wolves think this £60 million bid, when it goes in, is big enough to try and persuade them? I mean, it would be a good level of profit for them. Bear in mind, he was on loan at Molineux last season from Celta Vigo, and there was an obligation for them to buy him worth £23 million. So Wolves have only just paid £23 million for this player. They could potentially sell him for 60. That sounds like a great bit of business, until you start thinking, well, where are they going to get a replacement from? What does a replacement look like? So just to reiterate that breaking news, we've been told to expect an increased bid from Newcastle, probably at some point today, worth £60 million. That's £5 million more than they made for him yesterday in an offer. That was rejected. The bid hasn't gone in yet, so we don't know how Wolves are going to respond.
Well, I guess the other question about the value of the player, you talked, about it being important because time is ticking away on Wolves to find someone to replace him, but also Wolves will be aware that Alexander Isak, there could be a lot of money coming in for Newcastle, and Wolves could use that to drive up the price should they want to. And
that's all part of the dynamic here. I mean, Darmish has been doing an awful lot of work on the domino effect and how all of these strikers and their futures kind of are intertwined, if you like, at the moment. Yes, Wolves know that Newcastle are potentially going to get a big windfall for Alexander Isak. Already an offer of £110 million turned down. Could that be 120 to come? But Newcastle are being very prudent here. They're not going to overpay for targets, and they're determined not to. You know, they know that Alexander Isak is a unique world talent as a striker, and they suspect that anybody they get in to replace him is not of that calibre yet. They hope that under the brilliant coaching of Eddie Howe, they might be able to improve that in time to come, of course, and improve the value of that player. But they don't want to overpay for these players. Imagine they want two strikers in Newcastle, we know that. Imagine if they paid 60 for Strand Larsen and then 60 for Wissa at Brentford. They've blown the entire £120 million they might get for Alexander Isak. And do they think they've got a better deal? Do they think they've got two improved players in Strand Larsen and Wissa compared with Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak? I'd argue they probably don't think that.
The argument here as well is, who is he a replacement for? The messaging has consistently been he might be a replacement for Callum Wilson rather than Alexander Isak. And whether that's being put out there so that the price for Alexander Isak is maintained, because if Liverpool see an Alexander Isak replacement coming in, then they think, well, you've got your replacement, we don't need to pay how much you're valuing Alexander Isak at. But what was interesting that is the Newcastle statement. I keep going back to it. After Alexander Isak made it clear that he felt there were promises that had been broken, Newcastle United said, no promises, we don't know anything about this. But significantly in that statement, they did say that the terms and the conditions of a sale have not been met. Now, as much as people will say, well, Newcastle United is saying Alexander Isak is not for sale, by putting in a statement the terms and conditions were not met, by definition means that there are terms and conditions to sell Alexander Isak. They also went on to say that the conditions of those sales, they don't expect to be met in this transfer window. So you can look at that in two ways. First of all, yes, he's for sale, but the conditions will be, can Liverpool match their valuation alongside, can Newcastle United bring in those replacements? We don't expect the conditions to be met. Is that a message to Liverpool? Well, if you meet those conditions, there's a deal to be done.
Yeah, well, I assume that part of that statement refers to exactly what Vitor Pereira said last night, that every player has his price, even Alexander Isak. If Liverpool get to a certain number, then he would be able to go. You're right on those, what you say about conditions of the deal, being that Newcastle have wanted 2 forwards. He's one of them. Where is Yoane Wissa in all of this?
He's continuing to play the waiting game. We've been talking about him the entire window. Newcastle United, we know, want to sign him. Yoane Wissa has made it clear that he wants to go to Newcastle United. However, again...
Disgraced Lance Armstrong's unlikely role in Liverpool's title success under Arne Slot Liverpool boss Arne Slot has looked to several sporting moments and figures for inspiration, and he's analyzed Lance Armstrong to see how to gain mental edges over his rivals. Liverpool boss Arne Slot has studied and taken lessons from the body language of Lance Armstrong, the disgraced cyclist who had all 7 of his Tour de France titles stripped when it was confirmed that he had doped throughout his period of success. The Dutch coach and the American cyclist are not a natural fit, and while the 46-year-old Reds boss has never been interested in Armstrong's underhand methods, a new biography on him details how he took time to see how he was able to mentally dominate his opponents in the early 2000s as he excelled in his sport. The biography, Arne Slot, The New Era, by Dutch journalist Milos Guka, seen by The Independent, details that Slot studied Armstrong's psychological methods, especially when he was not at 100%, whether that through injury or fatigue. He noted how the American would smile at the camera so as to appear on top form, even when he wasn't. Armstrong's world would eventually come crashing down when his doping was discovered and made public. But regardless of that, those who raced against him would often comment on the mentality he bought, which helped him become so dominant. Liverpool were able to enjoy similar dominance en route to their 2nd Premier League triumph last season, which came as a surprise to many. Slot joined an elite group of managers who claimed the English top flight at the first attempt. The 46-year-old won 11 of his first 13 games to set up a commanding lead in the Premier League, after which the Reds never looked back. The Dutchman also lost just 1 of his first 30 games with Liverpool's rivals, never being able to close in and make the title race competitive. Many had tipped the Merseysiders to struggle following Jurgen Klopp's exit, especially with Slot coming from a league that was far from proven in England. However, he's proved a huge success, and many have backed Liverpool to land successive titles for the first time in more than 30 years. The Reds have overcome tactical and performance issues to begin the season with 2 wins from 2, and their latest win was another example of their mentality. Newcastle pegged them back from 2-0 down to draw level late on Monday night before they found a winner through 16-year-old Rio Nagumoha in the 100th minute. They also needed an 88th-minute strike from Federico Chiesa to see off Bournemouth on the opening night of the Premier League. That was another example of them squandering a 2-0 lead before they scored twice in the final stages to seal the 3 points. Liverpool's best and worst-case Champions League draw as nightmare scenario outlined. Liverpool will discover the 8 teams that it will face in the Champions League group phase today, taking on 2 sides from each of the 4 pots determined by UEFA. Liverpool topped last season's new-look 36-team Swiss-style Champions League group, but then drew PSG in the first knockout round, losing on penalties to the eventual winner of the tournament. That perhaps shows that performing well at this stage of the competition is not necessarily vital for going all the way. But the Reds will want to avoid having to play 2 extra games in the new year and can do so by finishing inside the top 8 places. Today, at 5 p.m. UK time, 12 p.m. ET, Liverpool will find out who it will be facing over the next few weeks, with its 8 opponents, all from outside of the Premier League, set to be determined. Every club will be drawn against 2 from each pot. Which teams are in which pot, though? And what are the best and worst-case scenarios that Arne Slot's side could face? Liverpool.com has taken a look. Pot 1. PSG, Real Madrid, Man City, Bayern, Liverpool, Inter, Chelsea, Borussia Dortmund, Barcelona. Verdict: Borussia Dortmund looks to be quite easily the easiest team to face here, and an away trip to see the yellow wall would be appealing. Aside from that, the likes of PSG, Barcelona, and Real Madrid would be preferable at Anfield. Pot 2. Arsenal, Leverkusen, Atletico, Benfica, Atalanta, Villarreal, Juventus, Eintracht Frankfurt, Club Brugge. Verdict: Liverpool would be the favorite to beat any of these teams. It would be better to avoid playing Bayer Leverkusen on the basis of mixing things up from last year, but the German side has since been weakened a lot. Juventus is not. The team is once was either. Pot 3. Tottenham, PSV, Ajax, Napoli, Sporting, Olympiacos, Slavia Prague, Bodo Glimt, Marseille. Verdict: Napoli is definitely the team to avoid here. A trip to Norway to play Bodo Glimt would be nice, while Liverpool should be able to beat PSV, Ajax, or Sporting if it needs to. Pot 4. Copenhagen, Monaco, Galatasaray, Union SG, Karabag, Athletic Club, Newcastle, Paphos, Kairat Almaty. Verdict: Athletic Club would be tricky, and AS Monaco would be better to avoid. Karabag and a really long trip to Azerbaijan would be best to avoid too. Liverpool comfortably beat Union SG not that long ago in the Europa League. The first game will be between 16-18 September, with the second between 30 September and 1st October. Match Day 3 is 21-22 October, with 2 rounds in November, 4-5 and 25-26. The final match day before Christmas is 9-10 of December, and then there are 2 rounds in January, 20, 21, and 28. The final is at the end of May in Budapest, Hungary. Best case draw: Borussia Dortmund, H, Inter, A, Villarreal, H, Club Brugge, A, Olympiacos, H, Slavia Prague, A, Copenhagen, H, Union SG, A. Worst case draw: Real Madrid, H, PSG, A, Juventus, H, Atletico, A, Sporting, H, Napoli, A, Athletic Club, H, Karabag, A.